Hey guys, welcome to another YouTube video. Today it's going to be a collections video, and today is a video of my collection of swords so far. Those who remember, it's not just knives I collect. I do collect swords, but only certain ones. And I picked them up at flea markets here and there when I could find them. And I picked them up through friends who sell them to me, and a couple of my friends gave me some of these. And a couple of them I made myself. So first things first is this one I got from my good buddy JJ Jinx. This is a India replica of a Confederate saber. Definitely one nice looking replica. Definitely would not want to be swung at with this one. It's definitely got some good weight to it. You can definitely wield it one-handed without a problem, which is what these were designed for. Beautiful piece. And I love the metal scabbard that it's got with it. Set that right there. Next is ones that I bought a year ago. These are cheap replicas, but I mostly just use them for display. This is a Confederate replica of a Confederate officer saber. It's got some beautiful etching on the blade. I know it's made in China, but heck, it's a display piece in my collection. If I find a more better replica, I'll probably replace these. Still, beautiful pieces. And I love the scabbards on these. Next is the Union replica officer saber that I also got from the same person. Again, a beautiful replica with a beautiful, awesome case. Next is another one of my India swords. This one is an India cavalry saber that I restored. I picked this up from a friend of mine locally, and he sold it to me, and I completely restored it and brought it back to the original condition. Beautiful. I love the markings on the blade. It's got some decent weight to it. This is probably one of the ones where if I wanted to, I could put an edge on this and probably actually use it. It has an actual forged tang, and it's really well balanced. I mean, I could definitely wield this one-handed without a problem. And I love the point that it's got on this, and I love the curve. I mean, this thing would definitely make one nice clean cut. And even the guard and hilt is actual brass. So India does make some decent replicas, and they are worth the money. And here's the scabbard that it came with when I got it. Again, I completely restored this one, brought it back to the original condition. Beautiful piece. Next is this one I picked up at a flea market a couple years back for $6. And this one I bought for two reasons. One, it's the only one I have that has a sheath like this. And two, I don't have very many silver versions of this. You see most of the ones I have like this are all gold or brass, whichever you prefer. This is the silver one I got. And that's beautiful. Check that out. It's obviously made in China, I know. But it's a beautiful sword. For $6 for an awesome display piece, I couldn't really go wrong. And I just fell in love with that handle. It's definitely a replica of an officer's sword, but I love that handle. I mean, you can just look at that all day. And it's very lightweight, and I even took it apart to make sure this has an actual tang on it. So if I wanted to, I could definitely put an edge on this, but I won't. Again, a beautiful piece. And again, for $6, you can't really complain. Okay. There's that. Next, getting into the other varieties of swords. Those who've been on my videos long enough remember this sword. I picked this up while I was in D. Queen, Arkansas from a friend of mine. And this was the only sword I did a video of testing. And it was my, I think it was my Halloween video. I put up some pumpkins and I tested this thing out. It's a beautiful Chinese replica of a Japanese katana. It's not a bad replica, but I still wouldn't use it due to the fact it is made in China. But it is an expensive replica, and I got a decent profit out of it. I gave the guy $60. This sword alone's worth about $150. And it's very lightweight. Most replica katanas, when you buy them, they're very front heavy. And that's not at all what katanas were designed for. They were designed to be very lightweight and very easy to swing. And this one's a very decent replica. It is made by Steel Warrior, so it's not terrible, but it's not good either. Again, it's one of those ones you could definitely beat the crap out of and not worry about it because it was only $150 brand new, and I paid $60 for it. It's still a good sword. Next is my first swords. These were the very first swords I got when I started my collection. These were given to me by my uncle many years ago, and I stupidly painted these black. And again, I didn't know what the heck I was doing at the time. Eventually, I want to strip the paint off this and turn it back into the original style. I just haven't had time to do that yet. And these I played with constantly. Me and my brother would actually sword fight with these because they were blunt, they weren't sharp. So eventually I'm going to strip these off and reshine them, but I just haven't had time, sadly. And this is the smaller one. Again, painted it black. Eventually I'm going to strip these apart and clean them up because now that I know what I'm doing, I'm confident I can clean these up, make them look brand new again. And then, this is one of my favorites. This is an India replica of an Afghan pole bar. And the scabbard's still very stiff for when I put it back together. That's why I got my gloves on. Beautiful sword. This one was one of my favorite restorations. And it came out beautiful. This is the handle that I put together. This piece I put together from leather and plastic. And I put a piece of leather right here to help cushion your hand. And it's a beautiful sword. And you would think this big circle on the bottom would hurt your hand. And it actually doesn't. It actually makes the sword easier to wield. And I love the design on the blade. Again, it came out super clean. I bought this one at a flea market, and it was well worth it. And I even restored the original scabbard, completely polished it up and put it all back together, and rewrapped it. Another beautiful piece to my collection. Again, it goes to show I do collect swords, but like I said, I don't collect them unless they're either well-made or they're ones that I would love to have just for the historical reasons. Because the designs are very historical. And speaking of that, here's another one. This is a large kukri sword that I bought from a flea market. Has an actual ram's horn handle. And I replaced the pommel because the original one was gone, so I replaced it with another piece of aluminum because that's what it originally was. And I threaded the tang and put the pommel back on and kept the original shape. This thing is definitely a monster. I would not want to get hit with this. And this one I do not keep sharp because I don't have a scabbard for it. The swords that have scabbards, some of them are sharp, some of them are not. Some of them that don't have scabbards are dull for safety reasons. Because these, as you see in my videos, I do display. One of my favorite swords. This is an India replica of a Viking Ulfbert, which is an actual Viking sword that was designed. Beautiful. And this one's always been one of my favorite swords to find because I always loved the Viking series on history. And I love their swords and how well made they are and how deadly they are. And this one is a very well-made replica. Even for being made in India, that's very well made. Sadly, I don't have a scabbard for this. That's why it's blunt. But eventually, when I get a scabbard, I'm going to put an edge on this one. Because this one originally was sharp when I got it. But I dulled it for safety reasons. Still a pretty mean-looking blade. Okay. Next is getting into some of the swords I made. This one was, I know it's ugly, but this one I based on a weird idea. It was when I was watching Mad Max, and I basically said, hey, if the world was to go to hell, what would I do real quick if I was stuck in a junkyard, because it was the nearest location, what could I throw together real quick to make a decently effective weapon? The blade is a bed frame, and I even put some nasty saw teeth on it, and the guard is a bicycle piece, and the handle is a railroad spike with a slit cut in it, pinned together. So the bottom of the spike could also be used as a skull crusher, and it balances the blade out, and this thing can be wielded one-handed. So, maybe ugly, but it's definitely functional. Which is why this is still in my collection, because it just came from an idea I had. Beautiful. Okay, next is one of my original swords. This one I got from my father a couple years ago. And originally it had a crappy red paint job that I stripped off because it was already coming off anyway. But I loved the guard that it had on it. So I kept the original blade style. I never finished it because I just forgot about it many years later. And I plan on finishing this sometime. And I put a wooden handle on it. Again, with what I had at the time. Still a very wieldable sword. Very lightweight. Definitely can be used. Just doesn't have an edge. Still, not a bad looking sword. And last but not least, is one of the swords I made with something I brought from D-Queen. This is an old sickle blade, or scythe, whichever you prefer to call it. And I just like, if I had one of these, how could I turn it into a sword? So that's exactly what I did. I shaved the blade down to a nice tang and put a steel pipe on it and pinned it together with 3 rivets. Put a nice aluminum guard on it and sharpened this end and kept the original curve and put a hole in it to give it kind of that cleaver style. Not bad, huh? Still a nice little zombie apocalypse weapon. And look at the thickness of that blade. This thing would definitely do some damage. And you could be wielded both or one-handed. Still, definitely a weird and deadly weapon. Alright guys, that's all my swords. Eventually I'll be getting more or collect more whenever I can find them. So vote down below which one was your favorite sword. And I hope you guys enjoyed. And as always, stay sharp and keep collecting.